get started. Like just dive into the product, like begin publishing. I think there's a tendency to overthink code, but also writing, but just ship frequently. Like just publish something, kind of put it out there. You're going to get much more value just putting out something which is kind of half baked than, really being a perfectionist and kind of holding it in. I'm like guilty of that to this day. I mean, I have a lot of drafts within my paragraph that just are not seeing the light of day because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, but I think that's the wrong approach. I think you should just be like not afraid to kind of put content out there in the world.
Yep. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode. Today's guest is Colin Armstrong, who is the founder of Paragraph, a product that is bringing newsletters and publications on chain, providing unique features such as NFT articles, subscribers via wallets, and many more. I've been using Paragraph for the last 6 months, and it's been very helpful to bring my content to an on-chain audience. We had a great discussion about upcoming features, the integration with Mirror, and a bit of Colin's background working at Google and Coinbase. Let me know if you enjoyed this episode in the comments, and thanks again for tuning in. Hello, Colin. How are you today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So excited about this episode because I've been using Paragraph and I've seen Paragraph grow for the last year. I think 6 months ago, I switched from Substack to Paragraph and started to create all my content on chain. The articles are now on chain. And yeah, I just want to go through the whole process and what you're planning next for Paragraph and Mirror. But I think a good place to start is with your background, Colin. I know you worked at Google and Coinbase. Maybe can you tell us a bit about that? What were you doing at Google? What were you doing at Coinbase before
Sure.
starting Paragraph?
Yeah. So let me kick it off with my background. So I, a little bit before Coinbase, started getting into crypto around 2011 or 2012 or so. Started mining Bitcoin, relatively early on a gaming desktop of mine, and then shortly after that, when Ethereum started kind of taking off, I kind of fell in love with that. Built a bunch of stuff on top of that. I was really drawn in, to kind of internet native form of money. Was kind of really drawn into that. In 2014, attended a hackathon and we built a pretty early version of Kickstarter on top of Ethereum. We ended up winning an award that was sponsored by Coinbase for best cryptocurrency hack. And then that led to working at Coinbase in 2015. So I worked on payments and anti-abuse there. They had a very large Bitcoin private key signing infrastructure. So as a result of it being very large and kind of dealing with large transaction volume, they had pretty robust anti-abuse and kind of security system there. So worked on a handful of different things to improve that, and also worked on launching Coinbase in Canada, which is very cool because I'm Canadian. So it's kind of a throwback to a bit of my roots, which was awesome. So after Coinbase, 2017, worked at Google for about 5 years, continued along with kind of the anti-abuse trend and worked on anti-abuse and privacy. So I originally joined because my manager actually saw that I had a bunch of cryptocurrency experience and they were having a lot of issues with cryptocurrency abuse. So people signing up to Google Cloud Platform and then just spinning up a bunch of Bitcoin miners and then using all the resources that Google Cloud Platform offers and then paying with a fraudulent credit card and then just pocketing the crypto and then effectively using the resources and servers for free. Worked on a bunch of different stuff there to mitigate that abuse. After maybe 2 or 3 years, moved on to the communications anti-abuse team. So Google has a lot of communication products. They have Google Meets, Google Voice, Android Messengers has a very large number of users worldwide. And as a result of kind of the large user base, again, there's a lot of abuse that occurs. I mean, there's fraud, there's spam, there's phishing, a lot of different things. So eventually managed a small team in charge of protecting a bunch of these Google products.
And Colin, how bad is the problem? Let's say from when you were there, 7 years ago, compared to now? You think things are getting worse or are getting better in terms of fraud and how we combat, fraud that's happening on crypto via crypto assets? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's a perpetual battle. And I think the type of fraud and abuse that appears is different and it kind of changes over time. Like during my time there, we saw a particular spam campaign with, say, I don't know, like some bad phishing campaign that appears. So then we modify our defenses. We maybe train a new model that's specifically targeted for that. And then we effectively block that spam campaign. And then there's another spam campaign that appears, which is kind of slightly different and sort of bypasses our protection. So it's fantastic job security, first of all, because there's always sort of a back and forth between protections and abusers. I think now with kind of the onset of generative AI, it's sort of shifted into a little bit more of like, impersonation, or I think election interference could be done to a much larger degree, or even phishing, I think could be a lot more targeted. And I think the actual types of abuse and the defenses that are in place always need to adapt to kind of the current meta of technology that's emerging over time.
Yeah, I used to have a manager who was a cybersecurity expert. He always repeated this phrase that security is not a destination; it's a journey, right? It's ever changing, and I think we see that in crypto especially. Yeah, I didn't know you had such a strong background in fraud detection. That's quite interesting. Now moving forward to Paragraph, because I mean it's a communications application or product which you were working a little bit towards those kind of things. But where did you get the idea? When did the Paragraph idea start?
Yeah, so I've been interested in the intersection between media and technology for a little while as well. I think shortly after I started getting into Bitcoin, I think 2012 or 2013, I was a small contributing editor at a tech publication called Benchmark Reviews, reviewed computer hardware, software, and just wrote a handful of different tech articles. Very early on, I was also kind of interested in sort of the editorial process and how it overlapped with technology. Paragraph specifically got the idea while I was at Google. I wanted to start writing more seriously myself and growing a personal audience and kind of growing a personal brand. This was during the pandemic, had a lot more free time. I was working from home, and it was a global pandemic. So I kind of assessed the current sort of state of publishing online. I think there's short form publishing. Twitter, X, effectively own the space for short form publishing, and Substack, I think, was kind of the de facto player, as you know, having been on Substack before for long form content. I quickly realized, there's a handful of concerns I had with the state at the time, but also the direction that a lot of these products were going. The first, I didn't think the paid subscription model was a great fit for everyone necessarily. I had a full-time job. I didn't want to publish on an ongoing basis. I didn't want to sort of have an obligation to churn out content regularly. It's also relatively challenging, I think, to come up with ideas and sort of produce high-quality content on a very frequent cadence. And, I didn't want to do this as my full-time job. I just wanted to put out sort of great content out there and then get rewarded for some of the content that I produce whenever I felt inspiration or whenever I wanted to. I also saw that I think very often there's a tension between reach and monetization. Like on Substack, the way to monetize right now is you need to paywall your content. So I wanted to get my content in front of as many people as possible. I didn't want to paywall it, right? That's effectively doing the opposite. You're alienating some level of your audience, and you're reducing kind of the valuable content that could get disseminated and propagated, throughout the internet. So I thought like maybe there's a better way, I think, to do this. The second kind of concern that I had, I think, with more so the direction that a lot of these platforms were going, I didn't think they enabled as full control over my audience as I would want, ideally. I think a lot of the promises that some of these platforms came out with was, you'll always own the email list. You'll always own kind of the direct relationship with your audience. But I think over time, it's very, I think, lucrative for a platform to start developing their own network effects and then start, launching follows and then not email subscribers. So then you actually cannot export follows. It needs to happen on the platform. And even from like an sort of an extensibility standpoint, a lot of these platforms don't have API access. So you cannot simply extend it or programmatically export things. If you wanted to offer, for example, Discord access to your subscribers, rather than doing it on the platform, like you just cannot do so. There's no API access. And I'm a developer, been coding for over 10 years. So, I mean, having this type of extensibility and API access in particular, I think is very important to me. I also, kind of the last problem that I identified, I struggled with growth, as I think a lot of creators do. A lot of people enjoyed the content that I was producing, but there's not really any real incentive for them to help me grow. They didn't really feel kind of ownership. They didn't have any stake in my creations. They certainly didn't have any sort of notion of shared success.
Yeah.
Me from like the reader's perspective as well. I mean, I was a paid subscriber to Lenny Rachitsky and a handful of other newsletters, and I forwarded them to my friends and family, and then got them to sign up for paid subscriptions, but didn't really get any upside, or didn't really sort of feel that I was getting sort of compensated or rewarded necessarily for distributing this content. Those were kind of the areas of concern, I think, that I identified. And then, having been in the crypto space for a while, I thought, like, using a bunch of these crypto economic primitives that have existed and that are kind of emerging at the time, like, is there a way where we could reduce the obligation or need for a creator to produce content on a very regular basis? Could we reduce the reliance on a company needing to expose APIs? If content is stored permissionlessly and anyone can ingest it at any point, then, like, you don't even need to expose an API. Anyone can extend the product. And then, can we do some novel things with incentives to help creators grow quicker than they could on sort of traditional platforms, either through crypto economic incentives or potentially through a handful of other things. So then that kind of developed into what Paragraph is today.
And the first version, Colin, the first version, how was it? Like the first MVP that you put it out in the world, what kind of features were there?
Yeah, so it was ugly, I think, in a word. So Paragraph used to be called Papyrus. That was the original name. In a handful of conversations with people who've never heard the word papyrus before, I mean, it was kind of challenging for them to wrap their head around. So quickly realized, it would make sense to adopt sort of a more common, easier to grok name. But the initial version of the product, I'm a developer. I have been for a while. It was actually targeted towards developers. It was Papyrus.Dev. Like, I had a dev TLD, but I wanted to, like, kind of encapsulate everything that I mentioned before, but target sort of a very small niche of users who would be developers, who would be, wanting to kind of produce their content, produce technical articles in particular, because that's where some of my experience lied before, and then get that in front of as many people as possible, and then preferably monetize off of that. But then, started getting a bunch of different traction kind of beyond the dev ecosystem. So very quickly realized it would make sense to sort of expand beyond that.
What was the traction like? So when did you notice, okay, there is something special happening here? Was it when you reach a certain number of writers, when you reach a certain number of, people collecting articles as NFTs? When did you notice, okay, there is something here that's special and I want to keep, pushing this?
So I think very early on, a lot of users churned. Like, people saw the products. It was certainly, we lacked a lot of features that are kind of table stakes for creators. The email functionality was very bare bones. The editor was lacking a lot of features. So I had a lot of conversations with a lot of writers, and I mean, they tried out the platform, they gave kind of promising feedback, but then they ultimately churned. And then we started building a lot more in the direction of kind of the original. Well, we meaning myself, solo founder originally, started building a lot more in the direction of kind of what I laid out before. And then I really think it was when Farcaster originally, like, we started building on top of Farcaster about 2 years ago. Decentralized social protocol, when we started getting a lot of very early traction on top of Farcaster through a handful of the integrations that we built. And what appealed to me there is a lot of the integrations we built, even to this day, it's just not possible to do on Twitter or on other platforms, just because, again, the constrained API access, and they just simply don't let you do this. So the very first integration we built on top of Farcaster was, a commenting integration similar to Discus. The realization we had was a lot of the conversation about a piece of long form content, about an article, doesn't actually happen on the platform itself that the article is hosted on. Instead, it happens on social media. So what if we could get the conversation on social media and then display it directly on the post itself, allowing creators to kind of get a better handle on the conversation that's going on, but also allow readers to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of this tertiary discussion. So we launched that, and then started getting a bunch of, like, very early users that was like, wow, this is very powerful. Like, it's just simply not possible to do on Twitter. They don't offer this in their APIs. We've never really seen this before. So that was kind of when, the power and sort of vision that I originally had was illustrated in a very tangible way. Anyone could sign up and then start posting, and the discussion would be pulled in. And then we've certainly iterated a bunch, through a variety of other integrations that have only been possible on, permissionless protocol since then. But I think that was kind of the initial spark.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, sharing my articles. Still, when I share my articles on Farcaster, the conversations kind of immediately appear below the article on the website, right? So that definitely shows that for new readers that there is some traction there, that there is a community behind, and as you said, they can jump directly into the conversation, right? So yeah, that's definitely something powerful. Some of the features from Paragraph that I really enjoy, one, you mentioned clearly that articles are NFTs, and then they can be integrated into other mediums, right? Into other platforms. So people can collect my articles on Paragraph directly, but they also show up in other marketplaces, right? So that's already kind of a great way to distribute your content, right? And then besides that, I think the subscribe option with a wallet, right, with a crypto wallet is also very powerful. I think I have now 4,000 to 5,000 subscribers via wallet, so wallet subscribers. Can you tell us why that's interesting, Colin? When we think about crypto wallets, when we think about these addresses as emails, right, as kind of the new inbox, where do you see this going? The distribution through crypto wallets? Do you think it's going to be as big as email or close to emails?
I certainly think we're in the early days of wallet newsletter or wallet communication in general. I think there's a lot of different players that are working in this area to try to push the adoption forward. I think like similar to kind of like an everything app right now, like WeChat or kind of pick your poison of everything app. I think in the future, if we think that everyone's going to have a wallet in some capacity, like either on their mobile phone or desktop or both, and they'd be able to exchange value within that wallet. Like they'd be able to purchase things, they'd be able to receive funds, etc. I mean, it just kind of naturally follows that communication would be sort of another medium that they would have within their wallet, because I mean, it's kind of the thing that ties their identity together. It's their namespace. It's everything effectively. I'm optimistic overall. I think it's very interesting to me, and I would love to see. Like I think within email, like there's been some discussion that there's a few sort of large players that kind of monopolize the entire space, and I mean, if you don't sort of abide by their rules, like you can't get into their inboxes, and I mean that kind of defeats the purpose of having SMTP, which is supposed to be this kind of permissionless protocol, if like it's kind of owned by one or two different players, or like the client layer rather is owned by one or two different players. So I think there's sort of an opportunity to potentially do things a little bit differently with some of these on-chain messaging providers.
There is another product which I think is older. It's probably a couple of years older than Paragraph, which is Mirror. And recently, I think a couple of months ago, you kind of joined forces with Mirror. It's a publishing platform, which is not necessarily, when you think about Mirror, you don't think about newsletters, right? It's more like a publish online. So can you walk us through this decision to join forces with Mirror? Where do you see these two products? Do you see them merging? Do you see them working in parallel? Where are some of the future of these two products?
Initially, when I began working on Paragraph, Mirror looked certainly different than it does today. They were originally focused on, lesser so on writing for individual writers, more so on DAO tooling. They wanted to provide a bunch of different, tools and functionalities for DAOs to communicate and to provide governance decisions together and to sort of tie things all together. And because of that, they also were very crypto native from the very start. Like you needed a wallet to use it. There was no notion of reaching out to govern it, to DAO members via email, etc. Paragraph, on the other hand, like the value props that I really thought resonated was, can we find ways to maximize distribution for creators? Email, I think, is a very large part. As you know, coming from Substack, it's a very large part to reach people. And then can we find novel ways for them to monetize? So, I mean, the value prop, I think, was pretty different overall initially. I think both products over time eventually developed in a similar direction. I think Mirror, it was a little bit more lucrative for them to start pursuing a little bit more in the writing space. Either individual writers or sort of larger communities or brands or what have you. A lot of them are producing content. And then Mirror wanted to see, could we find new crypto economic ways for them to monetize this content? So eventually the direction kind of where we ended up was a little bit similar. I do think Paragraph has always had a much larger emphasis on non-crypto natives. You can sign up with an email right now. You don't need to know nor care about crypto. And then you could still reach an audience and use it effectively like a Substack. Or what have you. So, I mean, we still differentiated in a handful of ways, but I mean that, some of the kind of underlying fundamental value prop was similar. It seemed for a lot of both creators and readers in the space, like there was some confusion because they said, so how does Paragraph differ from Mirror and how does Mirror differ from Paragraph? And it generally wasn't sort of a fantastic, I think, onboarding experience, especially because we were trying to onboard new people into, into the space. So because of that, roughly around this time as well, I think the Mirror team started getting a lot more excited about this other kind of product direction that they wanted to pursue. And then we closed a round of funding a little while ago. One of the same investors that invested in Mirror, Union Square Ventures. After we did that, I mean, it seemed like now it would make sense to have a conversation to see if there'd be some way to collaborate in some way with Mirror to allow them to do this new product direction, to make kind of the broad ecosystem much easier to onboard into, because there'd be sort of a product under a single team. And, for us, it would obviously be beneficial to collaborate them because they were a large leader in the space and have been for a little bit. The discussion sort of evolved over time, over a period of several months, into us taking ownership of the Mirror product.
How will that look like for writers and readers, publications? What will change for them in terms of Mirror and Paragraph? So if they ask you, hey, I have this new publication, where should I post now? Mirror or Paragraph? What will you tell them now that you own both products?
So what we're doing right now, like, I think both products have their strengths and weaknesses. I think Mirror's UX is substantially better. I think their brand has been a lot more well known. I think Paragraph's underlying a handful of our underlying features are built out a little bit more than Mirror's. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to determine what are kind of the core features of each that resonate the most with users that they need. I think it's going to be a multi-month process to determine exactly what kind of a combined product looks like. And then depending on what these features are and kind of what we settle on, that would kind of dictate what the resulting product looks like. I think it's like a little too early to say right now, but I think rest assured, no matter what direction we go in, we're going to provide very easy migration paths and automated migrations and ways to kind of preserve and persist content over to whatever sort of single product direction we choose. I do think it makes sense to have a single product, not two. I think even right now, like, again, it's kind of a little bit confusing and sort of not the greatest UX for new users that onboard. But I still think we need to kind of figure out a little bit what the migration paths would look like and kind of what these core features are that really resonate with people.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, I mean, for writers, for both, right? Readers and writers. For writers, it makes sense to kind of unify the network, right? It's much better for people to find what you're writing if it's one network or one UI UX experience, right? And from readers and consumers, it makes sense that they don't need to switch platforms and that they can find the best of the best quickly. So yeah, I can see how merging both products makes a lot of sense, at least for me as a writer, right? That's going to be a challenging but very exciting process, right? Because they are both very, very strong products, which show a lot of traction. Can you tell us, Colin, for those that aren't familiar with the stats, with the numbers, the kind of reach that you have been getting over the past year? What are some stats from both products, like in terms of publications, in terms of articles, mint tokens? So what are some standout stats that we can share?
Yeah, so we have across both products in the order of like 10 to hundreds of thousands of monthly active writers. And I mean, at least that number of posts, I mean, assuming they're doing, 1+ post, per month. In terms of articles minted and collected, I mean, I think there's like, it's a little seasonal, I think, given kind of the broader sort of crypto market, but in the order of like hundreds of thousands to millions of NFTs minted per year. Open rates have been very good overall. I think it's worth noting. Creator yourself, I think those have been valuable, but I think kind of in line with whatever the rest of the industry is doing in terms of open rates. We've been keeping an eye on that. So overall, I think, yeah, that's sort of representative sample.
Yeah, you're right. I remember I've been sending you messages about the open rates. You had open rates calculations for a while, but now you are going into more details, right? Like also click rates, right? And I think that's very important when we think about media companies that want to advertise and that doing it in a professional way with a budget, with a marketing team. They really pay attention to these metrics, right? Maybe when you are a solo writer, it's kind of fun to look at your metrics. But if you grow and you do this professionally, those metrics are basically the core of your business, right? As a media business. So it's very important. I still feel like since we are in the crypto space, it's kind of a new space also, or consumer crypto, a new thing. We haven't seen that many companies that would like to advertise. We see products, crypto wallets, DeFi protocols. From time to time, we see different products that emerge. But these are still kind of new companies in a way. They don't have these sort of professional marketing teams that have a dedicated budget for newsletters or for websites, right? So I think this will become very, very important in the next years as more companies join the space or the current companies mature, and they try to advertise, and that will, I believe, will bring another wave of revenue for writers, right, and creators that we are not thinking about just yet. When we think about publications, Colin, I see a lot of creators, right, like individual writers like myself. What do you think a company, let's say a newspaper or a digital magazine that maybe has a flavor of crypto, but maybe they also target, non-crypto readers, what do they gain for moving their whole operation to Paragraph or Mirror? What are some of the features that stand out for companies that make their job better? Have you thought of that? Like, what specific features are relevant for companies, media companies?
Hello, guys. I just wanted to take some time to remind you about my NFT subscription via Hypersub. All subscribers get access to my token gated newsletter articles. You also get the podcast episodes airdropped into your crypto wallet. 8% of the revenue is shared across all subscribers. You also get access to my Discord server and participate in monthly giveaways and allow list opportunities. You can cancel at any time, and also you can control the length. You can go on a month-to-month basis, or you can get a whole year at once. This is also how I can keep going with the newsletter and podcast, and your support really means a lot. Find the link in the show notes below, and you can always DM me through my social networks if you have any questions. Thanks for your support.
Yeah, so I think there's a handful. I think collaboration and coordination amongst any number of people has been, I think, easier as a result of crypto. You can split funds and just get them in real time into any number of wallets very easily. I think there's a lot of new monetization opportunities that can benefit some traditional media players. I think one good example. So Mirror, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, they had a feature related to crowdfunding. So people or companies or individuals could come on, and with just an idea and written article associated to that idea, they could embed a crowdfund and solicit investment from people that want to contribute to their ideas, and then potentially get something in return. So there was a bunch of like legitimate people and companies that raised large amount of ETH and actually put it towards some broader idea. So I mean, like, being able to crowdfund for specific things is sort of something that's uniquely enabled by crypto and allow you to sort of accrue value very quickly, kind of across the ecosystem. I also think there's something to say about sort of transparency of content and provenance. I mean, I mentioned earlier about impersonation and about some of the ways that I think abuse is trending, but I think if content is signed by a given wallet and the wallet is associated to, a journalist or what have you, and then the content was potentially stored on some type of permanent storage like Arweave, I think all of this combines, like, you can guarantee that the content is produced by the company.
Yeah, you make things much simpler, right? Like probably a publishing company, they have to invest a lot in their systems and as you said, like payments. Like I can think of a magazine with, let's say, 10 to 20 writers, and handling payments and handling contributions and all these things, and the provenance that this brings should make things much simpler, right, for a publication. And then there will be new value added because the actual articles become very relevant, right? Like over time, when we think about popular magazines like Times and these big magazines, and when you think about their covers, right, and then people collect these things, the same can happen for digital publications, right? And I feel like this will be something that more and more this sort of publications will start to see. I think Fortune is one that has been doing different things on chain, and I feel like this will continue to happen, right? Either new publications come aboard, or ones that are established start to experiment. Colin, we have talked about the products, we have talked about the journey. You have experienced the amazing stats, so the traction you're getting from the whole process, and comparing it to working at Coinbase, at Google. What are some of the challenges for a founder in the space?
I think like a handful of things come to mind. I think one is, like, I think sometimes founders can get the illusion of product market fit as a result of their audience or their customers like doing something on their product, but it turns out, the customers just want an airdrop or something like that. I think that's very prevalent. I think you need to really cut through the noise and see, like, are you building a sustainable business? Are you providing sort of significant demand and sort of a large value add that's sort of not just incrementally, but substantially better than kind of existing incumbents out there? Or instead are just people using your product because they want an airdrop. Right? So I think this happens all throughout the space. It makes like analytics harder. It makes tracking the actual impact of like a new feature harder, etc. So I think being a little careful on speculation and kind of leaning into that, I think, is important. Another challenge, I think, just the nature of the crypto market. I mean, it's like cyclic, it's seasonal. There's bull and bear markets constantly, and I mean that kind of determines the broader narrative, not only from like a public perception standpoint, but also from like, if you have a bunch of ETH on your balance sheet, because like that's just how you generate revenue. It just determines the activity, I think, on the product. So I think that's sort of in contrast to, or to a lesser degree, it happens much more often than sort of a traditional kind of startup in Web2 if you're like doing B2B SaaS or something. Not to say that those aren't necessarily seasonal or cyclic. I mean, I imagine during the pandemic, a massive amount of companies were struggling regardless of what they worked on. But I think it's compounded a lot more in crypto.
How do you stay motivated, and what do you focus on during the times where the metrics aren't that exciting? What do you do during those months in comparison to what you do in the exciting months? Or do you do the same basically?
Yeah, like I pretty much do the same. I don't really do anything differently. I think that might be in contrast to other founders, but we're trying to build a sustainable business. We're trying to provide the most value we can to creators and to their audience. So I mean, what we do during a bull and a bear, I mean, is kind of the same thing. Like we strongly believe in the underlying technology. We strongly believe in kind of the value props that we're providing, et cetera. So I mean, in general, I think like I probably ignore the market more than like potentially other founders that you ask for. But I mean, I think just kind of keep focused on what you're building, like just have conviction, kind of be in it for the long term. That's sort of the approach that I've taken so far in the past 2.5 years.
And for writers, Colin, when you talk to writers, me being a writer myself, I know it's hard to start. You also have been writing, and you now have this product where there are thousands of writers. So what's the best way to get started, and how do you keep focused on what you're doing? Do you think writers should pivot more? Any advice for aspiring online writers?
Yeah, my advice would be similar to advice given to a like maybe like a very early stage founder or like a developer or something. It would be like just get started. Like just dive into the product, like begin publishing. I think there's a tendency to overthink code, but also writing. But just ship frequently. Like just publish something, kind of put it out there. You're gonna get much more value just putting out something which is kind of half baked than really being a perfectionist and kind of holding it in. I'm like guilty of that to this day. I mean, I have a lot of drafts within my paragraph that just are not seeing the light of day because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. But I think that's the wrong approach. I think you should just be like not afraid to kind of put content out there in the world. And then like that's going to be how you kind of find a niche. That's going to be how you determine, are you enjoying this? That's going to be how you start building an audience and start growing. So I mean that's kind of that would be my advice to both founders like and creators.
What about the marketing side of things? Because it just doesn't work like you write and publish. You need to do more things, and maybe from the metrics and from again seeing the publications that have been successful, we know you already mentioned Farcaster has been a great place to integrate to Paragraph and bring more readers. But what are you seeing from successful publications and writers that bring them more readers? What are they doing that you think makes sense and it's working to bring more readers to their publications?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I feel like you as well, like you're not just trying to kind of build like a newsletter necessarily. You're trying to kind of more so build a community around your creations. And the creations could be written content, it could be a podcast, it could be like what have you. And I think a part of community is like actually engaging with people like within your community, right? So like if you get a bunch of subscribers and then you just send them posts, once every couple of weeks, but there's no sort of additional engagement after that, I think you're going to struggle a little bit more than maybe like creating a channel on Farcaster, or doing other things that would sort of increase the kind of the intra community relationships that form within your subscriber group. Like I think like Lenny Rachitsky did a great job on this. He had a Slack I was a part of for a while. He had a job board. He had all these other things. So I mean, I think just start engaging with kind of the early subscriber list that you build would kind of be my advice. I from like a paragraph creator, paragraph like founder standpoint, I would love to do more to help distribute content, as much as possible. So either incentivizing readers to share content and then rewarding them from doing so. Like we launched our referral rewards program a little while ago, to incentivizing more client apps to build on top of the content that we're producing. Like when you publish a post, you have the option of choosing to store on Arweave. Interface is a third-party app that reads from Arweave, and they have their own discovery layer. And there's a handful of others as well that integrate within our Arweave. So kind of like putting discovery and distribution on autopilot is sort of a longer term thing we want to do more of, and also just having a great kind of first party discovery experience as well. We're actively working on a bit of a redesign, and like first party discovery is going to be kind of front and center.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, I spend a lot of time, besides writing and researching, sharing and engaging with readers, chatting. I think that's key, and especially since these days it's very hard to bring people to your publication or to your website, any kind of website, right? With all these, the links aren't really working on X, but you can say the same about Instagram, LinkedIn. All these platforms aren't making it easier to get people outside of their platform. So definitely engaging is building a chat community that all those things make kind of complete the whole process, right? It's been great, Colin. I really enjoyed this conversation. I would like to close with three publications, three writers that you read from Paragraph, and you think people should subscribe to and follow them.
Sure. Yeah. So one is someone named Yash Bora. He runs Onchain Letters.xyz. He's been very early Paragraph user. He writes kind of what's on his mind. I mean, he writes occasionally about Farcaster, about broader crypto trends. So I really enjoy the content that he's creating, and overall I think he's a great subscribe. The second is Jared, Jared.xyz, Jared Hecht. He's an investor at USV. I mean, kind of similar to Yash, he kind of just writes what's on his mind, which I really like, that kind of like stream of consciousness thinking. I think he writes about the creator economy, he writes about crypto, he writes about just ideas he has about the broader ecosystem, and then he writes like some personal stuff as well. So I mean, I think I really look forward to his content as well. The last is so this kind of self promotion. So we have an internal newsletter called, well, not internal, but a creative newsletter called Paragraph Picks, where we're trying to highlight a bunch of the best content on Paragraph. It's a weekly newsletter. I think Yash and Jared have both been featured in these, but I mean, that's a great one to kind of get an aggregation of other great content that's being created, across the ecosystem. So that's paragraph.xyz/paragraph-picks is the URL. And also, Callo, of course, yours is fantastic as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
No, that's great. I am subscribed to those three newsletters actually, and I think they're very good, especially if you are into crypto and on-chain stuff. But when writers are capable of whatever, as you said, whatever they are thinking, they are able to produce articles with that. That's, I think, it's makes things easier, right? You don't need to research that much. You can just think and put your thoughts on Paragraph, and that makes it easier to keep the flow going for many months. Colin, it's been a pleasure. I cannot wait for the next stages of Paragraph and Mirror, and very excited to see the evolution of the product, and looking forward to the next updates. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Enjoying the conversation.